So no pressure then. Thanks, Gemma. Well, for this talk, I was going to deliver a version of the presentation I've got titled Music's Military and Mind Control Connection. But then I figured that most of you probably know about all that stuff anyway, if you're familiar with my work. You will know that many of these prominent A-list musicians have military family backgrounds. You'll know that the corporate music industry is used for mind control and social engineering and this kind of thing. So I thought it would be more interesting to delve into aspects of my new book. I've got a section in there called Sound Bites, and it's short stories that reaffirm many of the things that I've asserted in the previous volumes. So I've put together a collection of little vignettes. It's like one of those horror movie compendiums from the 1970s where you have these little short stories, you know? So I've lined up 5 of these that I think you'll hopefully find very interesting. Let's dive straight into it, shall we? The Smiths, with their song... It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be dissing the Smiths. Wait till you've heard the story. So this is their single, Panic. If I tell you I'm going to tell you something interesting about this song and the video that goes with it, would anyone know where I'm going with it, apart from Miles? Because he probably knows. Oh, good. That will make the story more fun. Let's look at some of the lyrics. The song goes, burn down the disco, hang the blessed DJ, because the music they constantly play says nothing to me about my life. On the Leeds side streets that you slip down, provincial towns that you jog round, hang the DJ, hang the DJ, hang the DJ. Can anyone think of a DJ we'd like to hang who used to slip down Leeds side streets and is known for jogging around provincial towns? There he is. So the question I have to ask is, were the Smiths portraying advanced knowledge of the true nature of Jimmy Savile when they put this single out back in 1986? And were we, the general public, as always, the last to know? Well, let's look at some clues.
Yeah.
So this is a promotional picture for the Queen is Dead album, from which the single is taken, from the Smiths. They're outside the Salford Lads Club, this iconic venue in Manchester. Savile had a connection to Manchester and Salford in particular. He was the presenter of the first episode of the BBC's Top of the Pops in 1964, which came out of Salford, Manchester, and he had connections with the organised crime scene of that particular city as well. The face on the picture of the sleeve is a little-known American actor by the name of Richard Bradford. Bradford as in the city that's next door to Leeds. Bradford as in a city very much connected to Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. And we know that Savile had an intimate friendship with Sutcliffe. According to some researchers, he may even have been complicit in some of Sutcliffe's crimes. Certainly one of the Yorkshire Ripper's victims' bodies was discovered very close to Roundhay Park in Leeds, where Savile had one of his residences. Now, I had a video version of the song lined up to show you. We've had a couple of technical issues, it happens, so I won't be able to show you the video, but I'll explain to you what's in it. So there's a New Zealand filmmaker by the name of Derek Jarman who produced an alternative version of the Panic video, and it was for a short film that was produced to promote the Smiths' The Queen is Dead album. So in the Derek Jarman video, you've got this quick-fire mishmash of scenes involving the House of Commons in London. You've got Buckingham Palace. You've got a guy running around the streets of London. Then you see Parliament. You see a spinning crown of the type the Queen wears, or did when she was alive anyway. And it's going up in flames. And at the end of the video, you've got a man lovingly kissing a skull.
Oh, God.
So if we think about what some of these images might be pertaining to, we were told that Jimmy Savile was into necrophilia. So could the guy kissing the skull be a knowing nod to that? When it comes to the Crown and Buckingham Palace, we also know that Savile was a close personal friend of the Queen, who knighted him twice. and he was very intimately involved in the whole of the royal family, particularly Charles and Diana, who, when their marriage started hitting a rocky patch, they called Savile in as a counsellor to try and patch things up. I mean, who else are you going to call other than an ageing paedophilic disc jockey in a tracksuit to patch up your marriage when it's failing, right? And then we have the reference to the House of Commons. And this is where we get some crossover into Johnny Rotten. Now, one thing about Johnny Rotten of Sex Pistols is that back in 1978, he seemingly outed Jimmy Savile in his true nature when, in an interview, he commented that there are loads of people that he'd like to kill, and one of them is Jimmy Savile. And he said, I bet he's into all kinds of sordid business that we're not allowed to talk about. And this appeared to indicate advanced knowledge on the part of Lydon, Johnny Rotten, of what Savile was really all about. And if you remember, when Savile's true nature was revealed in 2012, so we've known about what he was up to for 9 years now, his fellow BBC colleagues couldn't get to a microphone quick enough to denounce him and say, well, we all knew there was something dodgy about him, but you just knew not to say anything. It was like a best-kept secret within the organisation, within the corporation. But John Lydon appeared to know what he was all about in 1978, and then years later he appeared on a Piers Morgan chat show where he's getting patted on the back and, you know, Morgan's congratulating him on making those comments, even though hardly anyone knew about them at the time or heard the comments. But the other interesting thing about Lydon is that in his autobiography, Anger is an Energy, he talks of having attended kinky sex parties at the House of Commons in his pre-Sex Pistols day. So before Malcolm McLaren put that group together and hired John Lydon and also John Simon Ritchie, who became Sid Vicious, whose father worked as a guard outside Buckingham Palace. So, you know, punk rock spirit, yeah, you know, guard at Buckingham Palace. His mother was in the Air Force, so yet another connection into the world of the military there. Lydon was attending these sex parties at the House of Commons. And in the Derek Jarman video, we get shots of the House of Commons, which I find very interesting. Back to the lyrics. Panic on the streets of London, panic on the streets of Birmingham. I wonder to myself, will life ever be sane again, is the correct lyric. I've wondered myself that many times over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
The Leeds side streets that you slip down. I wondered to myself, hopes may rise on the Grasmere, but honey pie, you're not safe here. Well, when it comes to panic on the streets of London, Birmingham, and various other cities, as we know, Savile ran marathons and fun runs, which took him to all these different places. He hid behind this veil of doing a lot of great work for charity, which is where the Smashy and Nicey parodies came from. And this was a way of getting Savile close to children, because much of the work that he did involved children in hospitals, particularly the spinal injuries unit at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, where he got close to children who were bedridden and you know, couldn't move. But when it comes to the reference to hopes may rise on the Grasmere, what's that all about? Well, I might be reaching a bit here, but there was this article that emerged a couple of years ago regarding this pedophile, this sex beast from East Lancashire, jailed for 20 years after a string of attacks on young girls. Aged 60, so back in 1986 he would have been in his 20s, but the guy's name was Paul Evans. And if we look at the last paragraph of this newspaper article about him, we can see that he resided at Grasmere Avenue in Padiham. So whether that was a knowing nod towards this guy and his activities, we just have to speculate. And then we have, but honey pie, you're not safe here. So what's that all about? Well, a honey trap is when an event is set up to try and capture one of these paedophiles and trick them into revealing their true identity. So we could have a reference to that. But when it comes to the word pie, it puts me in mind of the PIE, the Paedophile Information Exchange, which is this organisation whereby paedophiles could communicate with each other, share information, tip each other off, give warnings, that kind of thing. Harriet Harman, the politician, was an apologist for pie and was quite openly vocal about how it should be allowed to exist and, you know, making all kinds of excuses for it. We now get into some very strange aspects of synchronicity involving Princess Diana and the TV show from the 1980s, Spitting Image. So we fall down all kinds of rabbit holes here, so stay with me on this one. The 1980s TV satire Spitting Image once included a sketch that featured Savile, the Smiths and Princess Diana. This doesn't tie in directly to the wider story that the Smiths themselves revealed the truth about Savile, but it does provide another public connection between the group and Savile. And it also ties into the British Royals, as Savile is said to have been retained as counsellor, as we said. The ruse for the sketch was that a member of the public had written into Savile's Jim'll Fix It, what's in a name, now that we know what he was up to, asking for him to play a Smiths song, but to arrange for someone other than Morrissey to sing it. So Savile recruits Diana to sing it instead. The song turns out to be, for no apparent reason, the band's Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. An odd side note to this is that the Smiths only ever played one concert on the date of Diana's death, the 31st of August. This was in 1986, when they performed just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. They're credited as having played just 2 songs in their set that night, Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now and Panic. So to recap, there'll be questions later. In the early 90s, Spitting Image brought the strange combination of Morrissey, Diana and Savile together for a spoof version of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. The Smiths are widely considered to have revealed the truth about Savile in their single Panic, and the band performed both songs and no others exactly 11 years before Diana's untimely death. When I hear about things like this, and the many other synchronicities, many of which I detail in my books, specifically the links between the Beatles and the movie Rosemary's Baby. I've got a story in Musical Truth Volume 3. It goes on forever, listing the amazing connections between that movie and the group. And then we have things like this. It just makes me feel as if this is beyond the realms of human planning. This is beyond people sitting around a table and saying, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do that. It seems to go within the realms of metaphysical forces that seem to be conspiring to make these strange links happen. And there are many examples of them. But I'll leave that story there, and we'll move on to the next vignette. It's been a part of what's gone on in the building, but she gets into this van, and right at the end of the video, she gives it the Masonic shush sign, the keeping of secrets, the allegiance to secret societies and the keeping of oaths of secrecy being conveyed there. So that was an interesting little sign that we got at the end of that video. So whatever else the themes in Kate's songs are, they're never boring, and she certainly pushes the envelope. And it turns out there's no shortage of material to get into when we consider strange, esoteric, metaphysical aspects of her persona and her entire career. So very little is known about Kate Bush's family background. I could only find this one video of a TV interview from the 1970s, just when her career had taken off, involving her parents. So in the middle there, you've got her mother, Hannah, who was a nurse, originally from Ireland, and her father is there on the left, very blurred. It's a very blurry image from this video. I couldn't find any photographs of this guy online, and there's very little information available about him, other than that he was a doctor, some kind of doctor. We don't get to find out what he specialised in, although I hazard a guess that it involved mind control research. So that's all we really know about where she came from in terms of the family. But there are many other strange aspects to her very sudden rise to fame. So we're told that she taught herself to play piano at the age of 11, and by the age of 13 she'd written somewhere around 100 songs, all by herself. So there appears to have been some very extreme musical prowess there, unless the songs had been gifted to her by somebody else. Her 2 brothers, by the way, were also involved in the music industry as well. They were in the folk music genre. We're told that she was given a big break by David Gilmour of the group Pink Floyd, who apparently heard one of her early demo tapes, and he was so impressed that he secured her studio recording time at EMI Studios, where the Beatles' classic albums had been recorded, and she got a session or several sessions with Jeff Emerick, who'd been involved in many of those Beatles recording sessions. So that was a lucky break, eh? Looking at imagery in many of her sleeves and promotional pictures and such, we see lots of familiar signs and symbols. Here we've got a depiction of the all-seeing eye, the idea of the pineal gland and the eye of providence and all of this being conveyed. And this is for her single, The Man with the Child in His Eyes. She's said to have written this song when she was 13 years old. And the lyrics talk about this figure that appears in her bedroom late at night, just before she's due to go to sleep. So this conjures up ideas of a ghostly kind of entity coming into her world. Well, it does to me anyway. But the cover story for who the man with the child in his eyes was is that it was an early boyfriend of hers, this guy by the name of Steve Blacknell. He's done interviews where he said, yes, it was me. I was the inspiration for that song. I was the man with the child in his eyes. Well, that didn't do his career any harm, because he went on to become a television presenter for MTV in the mid-1980s, this kind of era. He also became a record industry executive. He signed a whole load of bands, including A Flock of Seagulls, and he opened a couple of very prominent nightclubs in London. So he went on to have quite a useful career himself off the back of that fame. Kate's first single was Wuthering Heights, and it rocketed to #1. It drew on the Bronte story, the novel, the original work, and it spoke of Cathy and Heathcliff from the story, and she's appearing outside his window and saying, "Let me in, it's so cold out here," and she turns out to be basically a ghost, this ghostly spiritual entity. So again, we've got these ideas of otherworldly realms being conjured up there. There were 2 official videos for Wuthering Heights. The main one that most people will be familiar with sees Kate in a white ballerina's dress and she's dancing around the studio. But there was a second promotional video where she's in a red dress and she's in an outdoor location performing the song. Well, it turns out that outdoor location is a place known as Baden's Clump, not Biden's. Baden's Clump, which is on Salisbury Plain, very close to Stonehenge. So I love the way that at many of these conferences, many of the speakers' talks kind of synchronistically overlap with each other as well. We've heard a lot about Stonehenge today. So for some reason, it was felt to record this video at that site of mystical significance. And it's not the only time that Kate has shot a video at a site of mystical significance, as we'll come on to. And then just along the road from Stonehenge, you've got Lark Hill Military Camp. You often find that at sites of mystical significance, they put a bloody military operation right next door to kind of absorb some of that energy and imbue it with some of the dark energy that these military bases represent. So another sleeve to the single Sat in Your Lap. So here's Kate clutching a globe with a dunce's hat on. A dunce's hat was given to people that were considered stupid and a bit, lacking in intelligence, and she's holding a globe. Okay. Then we've got Kate giving it what I refer to as the 1,000-yard stare. And this is one of the clues, as I interpret it, to suggest that she was subject to trauma-based mind control. Yeah. This is a subject area I go into big time in my work. It's in my books and it's in many of my talks in terms of what gets done to many of these artists very early on in childhood to prepare them for a life of servitude in the entertainment industry. There are many visual indicators and motifs and signs and symbols that get implanted into videos and album artwork and all this kind of thing to indicate that trauma-based mind control is there. And this ties into satanic ritual abuse as well. So there are quite a few examples where Kate seems to be just giving this 1,000-yard stare, which is compatible with dissociative identity disorder, the multiple personalities that victims of mind control slip into. And I think we've been given quite a few indicators of that. So going back to the song Sat in Your Lap, it hints at an initiate to an occult mystery school seeking to obtain advanced knowledge, but finding that the process is a struggle and is the preserve of only a select few. We appear to be getting an insight into the concept of satanic inversion and Orwellian doublespeak too, with the line, some say that heaven is hell, some say that hell is heaven. That seems to be something that Jimmy Savile did as well, by the way, with his famous catchphrase, now then, which when you think about it are polar opposites. So it's kind of doublespeak, it's confusion, it's satanic masterful speaking, I would suggest. Then the following appears to represent a mockery of those who think they can achieve high status and top-level employment without having first obtained secret societal knowledge through association, like Freemasons, for example. Could we be getting clues as to some of Kate's own fraternal connections, truth in plain sight style, as a result of her family background? I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a scholar, but I really can't be bothered. Oh, just give me it quick. Gimme, 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 gimme. Similar themes appeared to be conveyed in the song Them Heavy People from Kate's debut album The Kick Inside, with several lines speaking of the process of humans reconnecting with their divine nature while in bodily form, like, every one of us has a heaven inside. They open doorways that I thought were shut for good. We humans got it all, we perform the miracles. We also appear to be back to the dissociation caused by lifelong trauma-based mind control, however, and the thin line between torture and ecstasy, with lines like, I was hiding in a room in my mind, which speaks to the different shattered compartments that is created through the trauma-based programming. They build up my body, break me emotionally, it's nearly killing me, but what a lovely feeling. Kate put out a song called Lilith, and there was a video sequence film for this as part of a short film that was produced at the time. And it's very disturbing. I would show it to you, but I can't get it to work, sadly. It's got lots of dark, demonic themes in it. It's got a cameo from Lindsay Kemp, who was a mime artist who was a mentor to an early David Bowie. He taught him the art of mime before Bowie came out as a fully fledged singer. It's also got Miranda Richardson from the comic strip and Blackadder. She's got a cameo role in it. And also featured in this video is Kate's own mother, Hannah, who makes a very unexpected cameo. And she's seen comforting Kate after she's been through some traumatic events. But either way, it's all very dark and it's not my idea of entertainment. So here's a bit more about Lily, as well as possibly referencing Lilith. The Jewish Kabbalah teaches that the demon Lilith preceded Eve as the first woman and as Adam's first wife, but Lilith managed to disappear from the Garden of Eden. Lily is also a nickname for Elizabeth, the Queen being privately nicknamed Lilibet, and is a known incantation or ritual in witchcraft and satanic practices. The official story is that the song was inspired by the late Lily Cornford, Kate's friend and personal healer, who, Kate said, believed in the power of angels and taught me to see them in a different light. The lyrics contain part of an incantation known as the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, described on Wikipedia as a ceremonial magic ritual devised and used by the original Order of the Golden Dawn. The three founders, William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Liddell Mathers, were Freemasons. What a surprise. Aleister Crowley was also a prominent member. The principal components of the Kabbalistic cross and the LBRP are drawn from the works of French occultist Eliphas Levi, the creator of the Baphomet archetype. Looking at another video to the song Sealed in Gaffer, interesting title, where you've got Kate pictured inside a barn with chains being hung from the rafters there. And survivors of satanic ritual abuse, including Fiona Barnett in Australia and Jeanette Archer in the UK, have spoken of being kept captive in barns and being tied up in chains. So interesting that those ideas get portrayed in this video. In the same video, Kate is giving it the old one-eyed sign that we've seen so many of our favourite household name artists doing. There's her mother, Hannah, towards the end of the video, comforting her. And then the subject of pedophilia has also crept into Kate's lyrics, albeit with plausible deniability. Her song The Infant Kiss is said to have been inspired by the gothic horror movie The Innocents, itself adapted from the Henry James novel The Turn of the Screw. The story concerns a governess who believes the spirit of her dead lover is trying to reach her through the children she looks after. Hence the lyrics, I say goodnight, I tuck him in tight, but things are not right. What is this? An infant kiss that sends my body tingling? I've never fallen for a little boy before. No control. Kate put out an album called The Red Shoes. Anyone who studied the subject area of adrenochrome and related themes will be familiar with the idea of the Red Shoe Club. Leave that one there. Never Forever, on this particular sleeve, we've got a whole load of pagan, Wiccan kind of archaic imagery going on. This sleeve reminds me of Michael Jackson's Dangerous album, actually, where you've got a similar montage of interesting stuff to get into. The video to Cloud Busting. So Kate, through a couple of her songs, seems to have shown an interest for the idea of suppressed technology that is kept away from the masses. So the song and the video Cloud Busting from 1985 concerned the orgone energy technology of Wilhelm Reich. And in the video you've got Donald Sutherland, the actor, playing the part of Reich, and Kate is playing the part of Reich's son, Peter. The story is based around a book that Peter Reich wrote about his father. And the video is all about the power of this orgone technology to manipulate weather, to move clouds around and to have them rain in desired areas at will. This video was shot on White Horse Hill in Uffington, Oxfordshire, which is another site of mystical significance. And it was directed by Terry Gilliam of Monty Python fame. There was another song and video concerning itself with suppressed technology, and this was called Experiment 4. And this was all about sound weaponry, the military-grade usage of sound to cause great harm and damage in a population. And Kate speaks in the lyrics of having been involved in this secret government experiment where we don't really know what we're doing, we're just seeing what we find. And in the video, they're messing around with all this sound technology, and they end up unwittingly conjuring up demonic entities, which end up killing all the scientists. And you see this body count littered down the corridors of all these scientists that have been taken out by these demonic entities. And at the end of the video, you see this facility where all this has taken place being sealed off. And Kate gets into a van where she's driven off, and they're never boring. And she certainly pushes the envelope, as is the case with Experiment 4. Okay, so there's some lyrics from the song there. We were working secretly for the military. Our experiment in sound was nearly ready to begin. We know only in theory what we are doing. Music made for pleasure, music made to thrill. And as I've noted at the end there, Agadoo it is not. Kate was off the scene for many years. She did some live shows in 1980, and then she was not heard of on the live circuit again until 2014, when she did a series of comeback concerts at Hammersmith Odeon in London. And here's a still from one of those concerts. There was all kinds of interesting themes being deployed there, but one of them involved her band members wearing these bird mask things of the type that were worn at the time of the bubonic plague. Okay. Round about the same time, Kate got made a CBE, Commander of the British Empire by the Queen. Now, I found this hugely disappointing because she'd always been this wildly creative, imaginative artist who stood out a mile from any of her contemporaries, made very interesting music, covered themes that no other artist went close to. But how disappointing that she ended up endearing herself to the establishment control system by accepting this gong. And here, I think, again, we get another indicator as to what she's really been all about all this time. There's also the question of her close personal friendship with Rolf Harris, who she invited to feature on 2 of her albums. We know all about what Rolf was up to now, of course. Could it have been the case that Kate and all those other people in the music industry at the time would have had some inkling as well? So she got Rolf to play didgeridoo on one of her albums, and he contributed vocals on the other. And after the news of his true nature and what he was up to broke surface, the vocals that he contributed to that second album were removed from all subsequent copies. So you won't find them on there now. In conclusion for this part then, the question that I asked in the book, is there enough here to be able to reasonably conclude that Kate emanates from a family background with inside knowledge of hidden elite technology, including trauma-based mind control, that she has revealed many of these secrets through her music in line with the concept of revelation of the method, and that, notwithstanding her obvious extreme talent, her entire career was facilitated for this purpose. Let's move on to vignette 3. And this concerns an individual who goes by the name of Somerset Belanoff. Has anyone in the room heard of Somerset Belanoff? No. We've got a few at the back there. So she's known as the Countess of Wettin and Banbury. She's said to be a cousin of the Queen, and she's said to be so far up the hierarchy within the power structure of the Illuminati that she can turn up unannounced at Buckingham Palace and get an immediate audience with the Queen. At least she could when she still lived there, while she was still alive. Personal theory. There is dispute over whether Somerset Belanoff actually exists or whether she's the product of myth and legend. It reminds me of the movie The Usual Suspects, where you've got the character of Kaiser Soze, and the characters spend the movie speculating on whether Kaiser Soze actually exists or whether it's a myth that's been invented. And so it is with the character of Somerset Belanoff. This appears to be the only picture that you'll find online of her, or it's at least claimed to be of her. The manager of Led Zeppelin, Peter Grant, who's over there on the left, certainly believed that she exists, or existed. You've got Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin right next to him there. In an interview with Melody Maker magazine, Peter Grant related an anecdote involving Somerset Belanoff. Got an excerpt from it here. He says, "One day, we all went up to Hampstead where some of Jimmy's Golden Dawn associates had a big old spooky house. So Jimmy Page was into the world of the dark occult. He was a student at Aleister Crowley, bought his house, Boleskine, up there on Loch Ness, and all of this. And it appears that Led Zeppelin were very firmly entrenched in dark occult practices. Well, we get there, and there's this intense feeling of dread and darkness, like pure evil in the house. And it didn't seem right to bring a young girl to such a place. Now, these old guys were all real old-school evil sorcerers. And straight away, they start moving their hands around in the air, and you can see Lilibet's, which is Grant's name for Belanoff, chair start to shake. Then one of the guys starts making gestures with his right hand, like in a choking motion, and pointing it towards Lilibet's throat. And you can see it's having an effect on her. Then Lilibet gets a look of complete satisfaction on her face, and she stands up and throws her arms into the air, and at that very moment, everything made of glass explodes, including, according to this story, the glass eye of one of these old occultists. Then two other things happened at the same time. The room became warm again immediately after everything shattered or exploded, And at the same moment, the radio in the corner of the room came on and started playing that song by the Loving Spoonful, Do You Believe in Magic in a Young Girl's Heart? Then Lilibet does a little spin and a bow with this innocent smile, and as she leans down over the old sorcerer with the shattered hand and the one with the shattered glass eye, she says, "That, gentlemen, is the way we do it up at Glamis." So she's said to come out of Queen Mother's family bloodline connected to Glamis Castle in Scotland. So that's her connection into the royals, if indeed she does exist. But according to many, she was also the inspiration for the lyrical content of Led Zeppelin's most famous song, Stairway to Heaven. So when we hear of there's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold and she's buying a stairway to heaven, when she gets there she knows if the stores are all closed, with a word she can get what she came for. That's said to be a reference for the fact that she's so rich and so influential and so used to getting her own way that the stores being closed would never be a problem. And she seems to reappear later in the song as well, another reference to a lady we all know. Another interesting thing, though, is that elsewhere in the song, we get the line, "If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now. It's just a spring clean for the May Queen." Somerset Belanoff is said to have been born on the 1st of May, 1953, which is Beltane, which is Walpurgisnacht. It's a date of great significance in the occult calendar, May Day. And this section of the Led Zeppelin song is the part where, if you reverse it and get a backmasked version of the recording, the line, "It's just a spring clean for the May Queen," comes out as, "Here's to my sweet Satan." I've got into the concept of backmasked messages in previous talks, and it's also in my books. And Stairway to Heaven is given as one of the classic examples of the phenomenon of backmasking in action. Here's a comment which Somerset Belanoff is said to have made to the Reverend Billy Graham. "I've met your devil, sir, and frankly, I was not impressed. Lucifer is a third-rate demonic entity who relies on his biblical fame in an attempt to hold on to power. The pathetic fool once offered to give me the world on a silver platter in return for my immortal soul. I told him I already have the world, I have the silver platter, and I have no need of his silly trinkets. I told him if he further annoyed us, I would take his eyes out, and he left. I was 13 years old." She was also no fan of Aleister Crowley, and she denounced him as an amateur and a very poor magician. Bohemian Grove, well, I'm sure we're all familiar with that place and the rituals that are said to go on there and the types of individuals that are said to gather there. Well, apparently, Bohemian Grove was once within the property portfolio of the Belanoff Glamis Group International, and it was divested as of January 20th, 2021. Then we have what is said to be the daughter of Somerset Belanoff. This is her Twitter page, and it's titled "Cannibal Cravings at the Hollydale." I'm just forgetting her first name at the moment. Karina Belanoff, that's it. So according to her Twitter profile, she's the daughter of Somerset Belanoff, the proprietor of Cannibal Cravings at the Hollydale, Elector General, Wetting World Governing Council. We can see the sort of things that she likes to tweet about. "Celebrate alliance with Amish Underground Brotherhood by joining us at the Hollydale for the witching event. 8 witches will be eaten for our eternal nourishment." And then later on, the Kentucky Viper Militia leadership wants us to remind everyone they are not racist and they're pro-government. Yes, they're violent criminals with a taste for cannibalism, but they're behaving themselves tonight. So this ties in with Marina Abramovich and the whole idea of spirit cooking and Pizzagate and all this kind of stuff. It's all connected. And there's also a restaurant in LA which purports to serve human flesh on the menu, and it's had many celebrities as its patrons, including Katy Perry, reportedly. So it's all deeply sick, and here we have what is said to be Somerset Belanoff's daughter embroiled in the whole thing. So it might seem very strange when we consider that she is said to have been in a romantic relationship with Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, and also in a romantic relationship for a short period with Mark Bolan of T-Rex. Why should there possibly be any kind of connection between an aristocrat, someone of so-called blue blood stock, and a prominent musician, rock star? Well, it's not the first time we've seen this through history. Back in the 1960s, we had the jazz musician Thelonious Monk, who was in a relationship with Pananika Rothschild, known socially as Nika, this is her here, and she comes out of that infamous Rothschild family bloodline. Looking at one of Thelonious Monk's albums, we see many different versions of it depicted on the sleeve. And again, this is indicative of trauma-based mind control, where different alters, different personalities are created as a result of the programming. Is it possible that Pananika Rothschild was sent in as Thelonious Monk's mind control handler? And another more recent example, the rapper Jay Electronica, who's signed to Jay-Z's Rock Nation label, was in a relationship with Kate Rothschild of the same family. So that seems to be another extremely unlikely relationship, if you ask me. So as for whether Somerset Belanoff really exists or not, we'll have to figure that out for ourselves. 4 of 5. So this is Hebrew lettering. Anyone have any idea what it says?
No.
Okay. Doesn't spoil the surprise. Well, according to those that read Hebrew, this says Culture Club. And so we're into a story concerning Culture Club, the group, and specifically Boy George, and specifically one of their songs in particular, which was their debut hit, the one that first put them on the map, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me?
My bad.
Considering the video to the song, it starts out in a courtroom with distinctly Masonic regalia and decoration around. We have the jury, who are all made up in blackface. This was 1983. You wouldn't get away with it now. How does that song go? It was acceptable in the 80s. Wouldn't be in 2021, would it? In the woke era. Then we see Boy George appearing in the dock. He's about to face sentencing from the judge, and he's wearing a Jewish rabbi's hat. And in the video, he also seems to be wearing this garment, which has the words Culture Club in Hebrew. So this suggests that Boy George may have some kind of Jewish links. But the waters get muddied from comments that he made in 2007, when he publicly criticised his fellow pop star Madonna's embracing of the Jewish mystery school tradition of Kabbalah, stating that the faith is intolerant of gay and lesbian relationships. He previously described Madonna as a vile, hideous, horrible human being with no redeeming qualities. I wish he'd get off the fence and see what he means. George's father is said to have been physically abusive towards his wife. George himself described him as a terrible father and a terrible husband. In 1995, George's younger brother, Gerald, who suffers from schizophrenia, was convicted of killing his wife. After years of heavy drug addiction, George himself was convicted in New York of the assault and false imprisonment of a male escort who is said to have handcuffed to a radiator and beat with a metal chain. At this point, I normally show excerpts from the video to Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? You can get this on YouTube, but I'll tell you the two key sequences that should raise some eyebrows. So George is seen singing and cavorting with various crowds in a couple of venues in between the courtroom sessions. And you get captions flashed up on screen to say where he is at any given time. The first one states that it's the Gargoyle Club in Soho, London, in 1936. And you get the clientele all dressed in the dinner suits and the ball gowns of the 1930s era. And George is dancing around the tables, kind of seducing the clientele there. The Gargoyle Club was started in the late 1700s. It was founded by a socialite and a prominent politician at the time. And in more recent years, it got converted into a club known as Billy's. And this club was very influential in the new wave scene in London, which gave way to the new romantic scene that came later. George is said to have been put on the map himself by being the coat check attendant at the Blitz Club in Covent Garden, which was the key venue for the new romantic movement, of which Culture Club were a part. But Billy's was connected into that as well. And next door to Billy's, in the basement, you've got a club called Gossips, which is also a very influential nightclub. It's where the DJ Tim Westwood got his first break as a DJ. Got a couple of things to say about him in the book as well, but I won't go off on too many tangents. So in this first scene from the video, you've got George in the Gargoyle Club in Soho. In the next scene, you see him emerging fully clothed from a swimming pool, and gathered around the pool are people reclining on lounges and such. And then the caption comes up that it's Dolphin Square Health Club, 1957. So Dolphin Square is a place in Pimlico in London. A bit more about it here. It's hit the headlines in recent years in connection with paedophilia. Flats and apartments there are owned or rented by prominent MPs, and many have been implicated in accusations of child rape on site. Scotland Yard confirmed in 2014 that they'd launched a murder investigation connected to allegations of child sex abuse dating back to the 1970s and 1980s, involving 3 paedophile MPs and centred around flats in Dolphin Square. Among the politicians to have attended parties there were Margaret Thatcher's former Home Secretary, Baron Leon Britton. So in concluding this particular story, all these factors considered then, the question has to be asked, was the viewing public getting subtle clues as to the world of child sexual abuse at the hands of the world's elite through this enigmatic pop video, another expression of placing the truth in plain sight, even though virtually nobody in 1982 would have been able to identify it as such? And could it have been hinting that George himself had been subject to such abuse in his younger years? Indeed, could this, in fact, explain the origin of the boy tag in his artist name, Boy George, to identify him? Particularly considering that the song includes lyrics such as "This boy loves without reason," "Precious kisses, words that burn me, lovers never asked you why," and "Wrapped in sorrow, words are token, come inside and catch my tears." Final story, final vignette then, in this little collection. And it concerns ABBA. I presented this talk in Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, and at the point I brought up ABBA, I heard groans from the audience. As if to say, oh shit, he's not going to do them as well, is he? Can't you just leave ABBA alone? Well, the thing about this is, during my research for the first 2 Music Truth books, I didn't come across anything about ABBA. I wasn't particularly looking, but they didn't come across my radar. And I kept getting emails from people saying, are there any nefarious or dodgy aspects to ABBA that we should know about? And to start with, I answered them back by saying, well, nothing that I've come across. And then I kept on getting the messages saying, what do we need to know about ABBA? And I thought, well, maybe there's something there then, I better have a look. So I did, and I came up with this one. So here they are on an album sleeve with half of their faces shaded. It's very reminiscent of the theme that we got on the With the Beatles album from the Beatles in 1963. It's conveying the idea of the shadow self, embracing the shadow self. And it's also leaving one eye illuminated while the other one is kept in darkness. So we've got some interesting symbolism there. Where did the male members of ABBA, the driving force behind the group, the principal musicians and songwriters, come from? Well, both of them have a history going back to the 1960s, before ABBA was formed. So Bjorn was a part of this group, the Hootenanny Singers. There he is in the middle. Hootenanny as in Scottish, Scottish as in possibly 33rd Rite of Freemasonry. Who knows? And then Benny was in a group called the Hep Stars. There he is, top left, pre-beard days.
They're stunners, aren't they?
So some further stuff about them. First off, the group's name, ABBA, contains some word magic. In Hebrew, the word means father, and the reversibility of it has overtones of the adept and Aleister Crowley's Thelema philosophy, training themselves to read backwards. The group's Eurovision Song Contest winning breakthrough hit Waterloo has Masonic overtones, given Napoleon's Freemasonry. The Waterloo event has also become infamous as far as the Rothschild banking dynasty is concerned, given that Nathan Mayer Rothschild is said to have learnt early through his own personal couriers of Napoleon's defeat and used his unfair advantage to bid on the London Stock Exchange and make himself a fortune. So then ABBA gets launched off the back of Waterloo in 1974. Benny and Bjorn have had a makeover. They're pushing androgyny there. You know, Bjorn's looking distinctly feminine. And this was around the time that David Bowie and Brian Ferry had emerged, pushing that androgynous look as part of glam rock. It was all within the same era. Then, a couple of years later, we get the song Dancing Queen, arguably ABBA's best-known hit. And this was written for the new bride of the King of Sweden at the time. She was about to be installed, and this song was all about her and how she was young and free and loved dancing. So it was an ode to her. And this began an association between ABBA and the royalty and the aristocracy of Sweden. They hobnobbed with many members of, the so-called upper classes of Sweden. Anna Fried of ABBA was called on in 1993 to perform at the 50th birthday party of Queen Sylvia. Here she is. And more on Anna Fried, there was a story which reached the headlines a few years ago concerning her father and the fact that he was a Nazi soldier who was involved with the occupation of Norway in the post-World War II years. So Anna Fried is actually Norwegian, and this song just concerns where her dad came from. She was one of what was known as the Tixerbanas, or German children, the offspring of Norwegian mothers and German soldier fathers. So that's something that was kept under wraps for many years, and then it finally broke. Got some other imagery. Here they are inside a pyramid for one of their album sleeves. We've seen this countless times over the decades with so many acts. Just communicating the fact that they're part of the control system furniture and that they're assets to be deployed as and when required. So after ABBA's breakup in 1983, Bjorn and Benny went on to pick up countless awards and merits, both from the record industry and from aspects of the Swedish government and academia, cementing their position as darlings of the establishment. They began writing musicals, one being Chess, with that game's obvious ties to occultism and Freemasonry through the black and white checkerboard symbolism. Prior to the formation of ABBA, well, we've already visited that. So this is how they look in 2021. Interesting that the men are in black, the women are in white, so we've got that black and white duality going on again. But ABBA reformed this year and put out a new album and a new single, despite things sounding pretty final when they split up in 1983 and put out their single Thank You for the Music, as if it was closing the lid on the entire chapter of ABBA's career. So what could possibly be the reason for ABBA reforming against all the odds in 2021? Well, one suggestion that was made to me by an email correspondent, which seems quite plausible to me, is ABBA were absolutely loved by the Australian nation. They toured there in the 1970s. They really endeared themselves to Australian audiences. Their record sales took off, and ABBA are absolute heroes in Australia. Australia bloody loves them. If we think about what's been happening in Australia this year, the convict tyranny has been ramped up to record levels in that nation in particular. They've really been put through it at the hands of complete psychopathic maniacs like Dan Andrews and Michael Gunner. At various points in the year, we started to see some pushback from the Australian people. And this has gathered momentum at the protest rallies and with activism such as the blocking of shipping ports and the blocking of main road arteries and things like this. There's been an indicator there that the Australian people are not going to roll over and take what's being done to them without a fight. It took them a while to get engaged, but they're there now. And those that would have been observing this situation would have noted this. So they might have thought to themselves, what we need is some sort of distraction to get the general public looking over here so that they're not looking over here and noticing all this activism and all this pushback against the tyranny and all this exposing of the lies and deceptions that are being told to us connected to convict. So what better way of achieving that than by getting a group that is so loved by this particular nation to reform, put out a new album, put out a new single, and have everyone paying attention in this direction. As I say, that seems quite plausible to me, and it also suggests that ABBA always were owned assets of the industry machine to be deployed wherever and whenever required. So when the call would have come in to say, you lot are reforming, you're getting back in the studio, you're doing a new album, it's the sort of phone call you don't say no to when you're an owned asset. And I think that is the case with so many of these familiar household name artists that we have. So I'll leave everyone with that thought. So the reason why I do this work is not, as many people think, to piss all over people's musical heroes and just... And by the way, if I've not denigrated your particular musical hero yet, please be patient, I will get around. There's only so many groups I can showcase at a time. You know, I get that accusation. Oh, Mark, you're just out to piss on everyone's parade and ruin our nostalgic memories of our favourite artists. That's not why I do this. I mean, in the process of doing this work, I've had to let go many heroes of my own. DJ heroes as well as musicians, you know, people that I used to look up to in that profession. Truth is truth, and I'm only ever interested in exposing it wherever I find it. It speaks for itself. And the work I do, I feel, is just one piece in the jigsaw of all of us being able to comprehend the levels of mind and brainwashing that's been done to all of us, all of our lives. There are other people who focus on their own specialist areas. We've heard many of them today. This just happens to be my specialist area. And my little piece of the jigsaw puzzle can be slotted in alongside all the others to give us the big picture. There's a statement that I often end these talks on, which goes, there's no shame in admitting you were bamboozled. Yeah. All of us are from the earliest age. The dignity comes from acknowledging that it happened and resolving to never be fooled in the same way again. Yeah. You get the phrase, fool me once, shame on you. Yeah. Fool me twice, shame on me. Because we're supposed to learn from these things. And this is what the Who were talking about, not the Tedros lot, the group, the Who, in their song, Won't Get Fooled Again. That song was all about social engineering and how it gets done, because they were in a position to know about these things. They talk about the parting on the left is now the parting on the right, and the beards have all grown longer overnight, because the song is about how trends and fashions and perceptions and public attitudes are shaped and moulded by the social engineers of this world. That's what the master propagandist Edward Bernays was talking about in 1928, nearly 100 years ago, when he talked of how our thoughts and our perceptions are shaped for us by men we've never heard of. That's that dynamic. The Who understood this, and they put it into their song, Won't Get Fooled Again. And that has to be our resolve, that we won't get fooled again. So we've heard today from Sandy about where the psychopathic, demonic, sick, freak ghouls that like to consider themselves the elites, our betters, want to take society, and where they want us to be slotted into that, in human settlement zones and all the rest of this Agenda 21 madness. But then we've also heard from Karen about the dynamic of manifestation and about how, in fact, we hold the power and we hold the key to shape and mould our own desired, experienced reality. So we can have the kind of play out and the kind of future that we collectively want any time enough of us all get on the same page and all focus our thoughts and our will and our intent towards that, plus take the physical steps that are needed to make it happen. And it's our generation that bear the responsibility for doing that. And our generation are faced with both a gift and a curse. It's a curse that we're having to live through this shit and navigate our way through to the other side, because nobody else is going to do it for us. Nobody's coming to save us. It's down to us collectively to do this. But it's also a gift because we have the incredible privilege of being that generation that puts down the tyranny, that banishes the evil and the darkness, and finally takes humanity to where it needs to be. That falls on us. And I feel they chose the wrong generation to fuck with. And we're going to let them know, right? We're going to send that message out. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. I want to thank everyone for attending. It's been a great day. Thanks to Miles for organising. Thanks to Matthew for the tech. Thanks to Gemma for hosting. Everyone else involved. Copies of my books are at the back if anyone wants to grab them. That having been said, I think we're off down the pub now, aren't we?
Absolutely brilliant. Save the best till last. I think I wasn't wrong there. Everyone's been brilliant today, though, but that was just, and your closing words as well. It's up to us. It's up to us. So yeah, it's over. It's over. The learning and the education, spiritual education is over, but obviously drinks in the pub and continue the friendship building and that energy. And we'll see you at the next Faces conference. This isn't going anywhere. It's going to get bigger and bigger. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all attending at Bases 2021. We're going to have a Bases 2022, and we're going to do Secret Space Program in April. Thank you for attending. The whole point about doing these was to get living people together talking, and we managed to do it twice this year. Thank you, Gemma. Thank you, Tina. Anybody want a Cornish pasty? And thank you for attending. Happy Christmas. Have a great evening. Goodbye. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.